again, thank you for joining. It is a pleasure to have all of you here with us for the first and foremost session of our virtual colloquy webinar series 1.1. Our introductory phase will be concentrating more on solar and we'll be covering other major topics on renewables and sustainable energy sector. Today, we have with us our distinguished speaker, Mr. Vijay H. Madhusudan. He is an IIT Madras graduate and is currently leading in Enfian Technologies and Solutions Private Limited as a founding director. He had also worked at Global Analytics. We are very pleased to have him as our mentor today, and I hope it will be informative and precise to our topic, scope and advancements of floating solar systems in India. I invite you to the session, sir.
Hi Aditya, thanks for the introduction. I hope I'm audible to everyone.
Yes, sir, you're audible.
Yeah. All right.
Yes,
So,
sir. May I?
so I'd just like to know the profile of people over here. They are mostly students, people in the industry. How's it like?
Yes, sir. Both are there. Undergraduates are also there, and professionals as well.
All right. Nice. Again, very good evening to all of you over here. I'll just briefly introduce you, about myself and then probably jump into sharing some details, whatever little that we know of floating solar in India and outside of India. So, to start with, I graduated from IIT Madras in 2007 and worked in data analytics for about 2 years, and then uh, got caught the entrepreneurship bug. So, started Enfrin in 2010, and we started pondering over sustainable technologies. We started with solar, went into LED lighting, and then again started developing our own solar floating solar product in 2016. And that's a brief journey. Okay. So I hope you can also pause me in between if there is any questions that you want to ask. So there's no problem at all on that, and I'll have it as informal as possible. So Aditya, is the screen visible?
Yes, sir, we can say.
Yeah, so the first fundamental thing that we will understand is I think most of you would know what is floating solar. So, floating solar, as the name suggests itself, is any solar power plant that is installed on water and it is floating on that. It's as simple as that. So, applications are varied. You can have it installed on industrial water ponds, dams, reservoirs, lakes, water treatment ponds, and a whole lot of them. Right now, people are trying to install floating solar on backwaters in the harbor where you have your backwater lagoons, then within coral reefs where you don't have too much of waves and tides. So, there are a lot of applications that people are trying to do that. And the primary reason is because two-thirds of our world is covered with water, and people are always running after the little bit of land that they can have, right? And with the increasing population, the pressure on land in the sense of people actually owning land is increasing, which is where we are looking at alternate land neutral technologies for solar. And why solar? Purely because it is a renewable technology, and that is the way moving forward in trying to make things green. So, typically, the advantages of solar, floating solar, are a multitude of them. Like when you're installing floating solar on raw water ponds or let's say drinking water reservoirs, you have water conservation in the sense of reduced evaporative losses. As I mentioned earlier, it's a land neutral technology. It increases the utilization of unusable space, which is the water surface itself. And typically we'll have to design this system for about 25 years. It's fairly low on maintenance because most of the water bodies, places around the water bodies, are dust free, and the biggest maintenance on solar panels is cleaning the solar panels itself, so it is low in that sense. Then it is eco-friendly. Most systems today are designed with aluminum, HDPE, UPVC, and other recyclable material, so that can be recycled after 25 years, so it is eco-friendly. Then it improves your plant utilization, reduces algae growth in water because it kind of provides a shade cover on the water itself. And it also provides a low cost energy storage solution, which is one of the most interesting things of floating solar, which I'll probably tell you people uh, towards the end of the presentation. And few considerations while doing a floating solar installation is that the system itself should have a low tilt angle, purely because you would not want the system to actually start having a drift because of large wind speeds. Then we need to have non-slippery systems, so that it is easily accessible and serviceable. Ease of installation is important, and also one of the biggest advantages is cooling of the solar panels through enhanced power generation. So these are predominantly a lot of advantages that's packed in one single solution. So typically the components of floating solar solutions is as in this diagram. So first you have a structure, a floating structure. It can be made in a multiple number of ways, with floats typically on which you have modules installed, and then this entire island, floating island, is moored and anchored to the bank or the bed of the reservoir or the lake. And then we can have floating uh, inverters on the bank with cables running, either DC or AC powered cables running to the substation. So I'm just assuming right now, my assumption is that people are aware of the design of solar PV power plants itself. If there's any questions on that, you can always shoot it out right now. Okay, so I'll just move forward on that.
Sir,
Yeah, yeah,
there is one question
yeah.
from Bhagu Krishna Kiran. Sir, is it with one side tilt or it will tilt with the direction of sun?
So right now the hi Jagu. So right now tracking on floating solar is not yet achieved. People are trying on that. So typically it's a fixed tilt system that we see on floating solar applications itself. Purely because one, the floating solar installation itself is about 15 to 20% more expensive than land mount installation, and trying to add a tracker and balancing the physical forces when the panels are moving is going to be that much of a complication and challenge. And today most solar power plants work purely on the lowest costing system, which gives them the highest ROI or the lowest cost of energy across lifetime. So it is still under development phase. There are one or two companies who are working on that. So this is a typical example of a blow molded floating solar system, a company that we work with also. So typically, I would say 95% or upwards of that use this technology of blow molding to actually create pontoons and islands, and then install the panel. So this was pioneered by CL Terry, which is a French company. They did their first installation in 2011, and most of their clientele were in Japan. And I think till about 2016, it was very, very slow in terms of the progress of the industry itself. And there was a huge boost with actually a gigawatt of installations being announced in China in Anhui province. That's when we had a couple of other companies springing up in China who actually copied the same fundamentals of what CL Terry was doing. So typically, the floating solar system has a main floating body which houses the panel. Clipping mechanism can be different with different manufacturers, and again a buoy which will aid as the ail. The aisles are required for people to aisles or catwalks is what I would say. They are required for people to actually move on the island and actually service and maintain the system. And again, you have screws and nuts which actually fasten each of these components together. So this is one of the project that they had completed with the same system that I had shown earlier. It's not us, but it's our partners. So this is in Japan, this is in Thailand. So you can also see that cables are actually laid on a floating pontoon that's created over here. And these are all megawatt scale installations that you see. So this is one of the project that we had done for the government of Kerala, where we did a feasibility study and DPR preparation for them. So it's more as a case study on the design side. Floating solar is not as simple as land-based or rooftop systems. There's a little more that one needs to look at purely in terms of the variance in water levels, the depth of the lake itself. Your mooring and anchoring design becomes very important over here. So what you see over here are typically the bathymetric maps, and the yellow region over here is typically the area that we figured out is the usable area within the lake. This entire region is the lake itself. This is in Karapula in Kerala. And here we had proposed about 10 megawatts of floating solar. So apart from this, the other studies that are to be done typically are involve socio-economic benefits and the social impact and the environmental impact of this. So typically we do not advise covering the entire water body with floating solar panels purely because it kills the ecosystem in the water. So we take a maximum of 25% coverage. Then you need to look at the available water levels at the lowest water level recorded across, let's say, 25 or 30 years, because once the water dries out, you still need the system to be floating. Then another important consideration is what is the infrastructure available to evacuate, because most of these reservoirs are in remote places where you might not have a substation close by, or you might not have the transmission lines. So that's a consideration, and also distance from the inverters, because if the inverters are very far, it leads to a lot of DC losses. So these are just high level things that are considered.
Sir, there are some doubts here. Shall I
Yeah.
read it now?
Yeah, you can.
So, Nehim Maskar had asked, will the system affect the river creatures? And I guess you answered it already. And yeah, the next is from Adul Kumar. Panels
Hmm.
used are mono or poly?
You can use any panel. Typically, my recommendation would be use monocrystalline panels with the highest efficiency, because the mounting cost is extremely high. So a comparison is, let's say, a megawatt of mounting system for ground mount would cost about 20 lakhs upwards, let's say 15 to 25 lakhs, and a megawatt of floating solar system can cost anywhere from, I think, 80 75 lakhs to about a crore and 25 lakhs. So the lesser area the panel has, or the more efficient the panel has, it's better for the project costing itself. Any other questions out there?
Yeah, sir, one more is there from Harshit Takral. So,
Hmm?
what is mooring and anchoring design?
I'll just go to that in the next slide. So basically, mooring is the technology on how you hold the entire island together. So the left image that you see over here, there is a plate which is connected to a chain, which is again finally anchored onto the bank. This is the system that is used to anchor the system. These are the hooks that, and the cables used to anchor the entire island onto the bank. So mooring is typically on how you handle the overall island, and anchoring is to make it stable and connected to the bank. And again, this is cables on floats, which are shown on the right side image. Sorry. Yeah. So this is the technology that we have been developing, which is Navi itself. So why we started developing this in 2016, we have had multiple iterations. We started with using HDPE and blow molding itself. Then we realized that it is not proven to last more than 20 years. And the in 2016, the oldest system was only 6 years old. So we started evaluating various other options. So we started our design on using UPVC, because UPVC is used in the construction industry and it has a life of over 30 years. So UPVC cannot be blow molded. So we have designed a system which can be extruded and welded to create the buoys, create the floats itself. So our system, what we have done is we have actually tried to make it modular, keeping the flotation system separate, the uh, structural supporting system which is made of aluminum which is separate, so that you can have your desired angles, and also the catwalks and walkways itself different. So these are the typical components that we use in our system which we have designed. It's being commercialized. So this is something that's been being developed for the last 2 years, 3 years actually. So quickly, moving to the opportunities in India, right? The largest project installed till date is 25 megawatts in NTPC Simhadri. I think it was a couple of months ago. Again, they have done this in association with BHEL, with floats itself, HTP blow molded floats. There are a whole lot of projects actually coming up. The potential in India alone is 280 gigawatts, because we have 18,000 square kilometers of water bodies within India. A few of the larger projects is 150 megawatts in Rihan Dam. It's an ongoing project taken by, I think, Shapurji Salunji at 3.36 rupees per unit, which is still pretty low, but I think about 30% or 40% higher than a land mount system. And there is a 600 megawatt that is proposed in Omkareshwar Dam in Madhya Pradesh, 100 megawatt in Ramagundam thermal power plant. And also there is a huge opportunity in raw water ponds in various process industries, and one of the key things that they suffer is evaporative losses. So you can cover, in fact, on a raw water pond, because you're not worried about ecos uh, the ecology of the entire pond, you can actually go up to like 90% coverage, because the water level variation is very low. And also you have you can you have that available throughout the year. And another key benefit is evaporation control methods itself. So this acts as an evaporation control method, and this slide is basically a comparison of existing evaporation control method. So today there are a couple of installations in, I think, California, where they use shade balls, HDPE shade balls, which is extremely expensive. Then there are modular plastic covers, and I think you might have read a news article of a Tamil Nadu minister actually trying to cover thermocol on top of lakes near Chennai to actually avoid evaporation losses. Then people use plastic cloths, and the most cost effective is use of fatty alcohols, which is they spray a layer of fatty alcohols to actually cut down on evaporation of water itself. So before we move to this, any other questions till now, Madhya?
Yes, sir, there is. Narendra Yadav has asked how much power will we get from this, and which particular system will we use this energy to run?
I didn't get the second part of the question.
I think he is asking like on what will we use this power that is harvested from floating solar
Okay.
system.
So typically floating solar, to answer the first part of the system, we expect the CUF of the plant to be higher than land mount, purely because of the cooling effect that the water has on the plants, on the power plant. So typically, let's say a land mount system, we can expect about 16 lakh units a year. This you can have an increase by at least about 3 to 4%. So it is more efficient in that sense. So which means we can look at about 16 and a half to 17 lakh units a year on floating solar systems. Now, the second thing is all the floating solar systems are typically going to be large scale systems. So if you're integrating that, it will be integrated with your grid power itself, and it will act like any solar power plant which feeds in power into your grid. And if you're looking at the floating solar power plants that can be installed in process industries, that will be integrated to the electrical system of the industry itself, like any rooftop system. So there is no change in terms of integration of a floating solar system with other electrical systems. One of the nicer parts. Okay, before I go to that, any other question, Aditya?
Yes, sir. There is four more.
Okay.
One from Karan Narang. Any ongoing project in Maharashtra?
Ongoing project in Maharashtra. I don't have it offhand. There are a couple of ongoing projects in Maharashtra. Probably I can connect offline and I'll see if I can put that across. Yeah.
Okay, so the next one is from Sundaram Rao. He is telling there is scarcity of solar technician in the market. So how the service industries like Enfrian or any other industries is fulfilling it through certain specialized skill training?
In fact, we don't provide skilled training itself. On floating solar, we offer design support and we only offer the not panels, sorry, the mounting structures to the projects. But coming to the upskilling of people, I think there are a couple of programs being run by MNRE, Government of India, and also private programs for people to understand this space itself. For example, in Karnataka, Karnataka Power Corporation, along with Cradle, is running a solar manager program, which is it's a 4 day course, and people can get to know about the space and the technology itself through these programs. And there is a fair bit that is happening. It's about intent, and if people really want to work in that space, there is a lot more information that is available at this point than what was there a couple of years ago.
Okay, sir. The next one is from Atul Kumar. What are the
Yes.
challenges compared to land installation in floating?
Uh, as I told, the biggest challenge in floating is that we need to consider one for high wind speeds, which is there in land also, but land is actually, you have a solid foundation for your entire system. So it is a lot easier in that sense. Now, in floating solar, your water levels tend to vary depending on the location itself. You need to account for that. You need to account for the ecological impact when you install the system, which is not so true in terms of land. Then the other thing is the critical thing over here is your anchoring and mooring mechanism itself that needs to be designed, because that is the entire thing which is holding the system together and ensuring that it doesn't get destroyed in the event of a cyclone, hurricane, or large wind speeds. Like again, an example of bad design, not in floating solar but in rooftop, is in a cyclone which we saw in Chennai again a couple of years ago, where a lot of rooftop solar systems actually got uprooted from the roof and started flying off with high wind speeds, purely because there was a compromise on the system design itself. So this being water with a lot of, let's say, you have to account for waves, you'll have to account for water level variations, and water bodies are typically large open surfaces, which means it's more prone to higher wind speeds. So that needs to be accounted for. And also the components that are used in the system need to be all IP65 grade, so that it doesn't get corroded over time, as it will be in constant, now what do you say, there is water affecting these systems always. Yeah. So these are the major challenges of floating solar systems itself.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next is from Ankit Rana. Sir, is there any inclination of solar cell with respect to sun?
Yes, that is typical of any ground mount rooftop or floating solar. It's dependent on the latitude. So we being on the northern hemisphere, normally, I think the thumb rule is about 0.85 times your latitude as your degree facing southwards. So that is a typical thumb rule, at least in the Indian scenario. As you move higher, tracking and other things come into picture and come into play. But here, to just answer the question, the angle that is required is similar to any ground mount system. But there's also a limitation in floating solar. A very high angle might cause a high draft on the system, which will tend to lift, actually high lift for the system when you have high wind speeds. So we'll have to actually balance between the angle for improved power generation and also the stability of the system itself. Yeah. Any other questions, Atya?
Yeah, sir, there is, but I guess you can continue and we can come back.
Okay, fine. Yeah.
Thank you, sir.
All right. Thank you. So, coming to the future itself, right? Floating solar actually offers an immense scope on hybridization. So, one of the best examples is we can hybridize floating solar with hydel power plants, which provides a cost-effective storage solution. Today, people cost of batteries or any storage solution is extremely high. Where if you were to look at the LCOE of a storage system, it can go as high as 10 rupees a unit. So one of the natural integration that we can do with floating solar is actually install these systems on the dams where you have hydel power plants. Uh, the key drivers for this is that you have large areas of remote water bodies, and 20% of the world's energy is driven by given by hydropower. Now, this being a land neutral system, again, I would like to emphasize that you don't have any land acquisition cost, and that can be seen in densely populated areas like Kerala, where people struggle for land, or even island nations like Maldives, Mauritius, and the other places where land is a very scarce commodity. So, floating solar is a boon for all these places. And the variable nature of solar energy, that means you can see the graph over here. It generates only between like about 6:30 or 7 in the morning to about 5 o'clock in the evening. So that can be compensated very well with a hydel power plant, because it's extremely simple to actually bring down the generation capacity or ramp up the generation capacity in hydel power plants very quickly. It's not true of thermal power plant, so it's not a very good solar might not be a very good hybridization with thermal power plants. So what our simple thing ideology over here is that whatever energy is generated by the floating solar system can be cut down by the power plant, so that you're storing more water in your reservoir for times when your water levels are low. Today, what happens is when the water levels are really low, people's actually the power utilities shut down hydel power plants and actually ramp up thermal power plants. So it kind of helps in reducing this imbalance over time. And the advantages of actually such a hybridization is that we can use the existing evacuation infrastructure, which itself accounts for about 10 to 15% of the solar power plant in general. So a hydel power plant has good evacuation infrastructure, and the compensating effect with water, which is what is the energy that I mentioned about earlier. Uh, when you have solar power, you can ramp down your idle power generation. And here, with two sources of energy, you have a higher reliability. because when something is not working, you still have some power being generated out of the shared infrastructure itself. So these are the key advantages, and I think that's more about what I had to say. Yeah, Aditya.
Okay, thank you, sir. So the next one is from Mehan Maskar. I guess he has already asked this. Will this system affect our river creatures?
Yes, it will if you cover the entire. First thing, it cannot be installed on river or moving water. It's on still water. So it will destroy your ecology in the uh, water body if it covers more than 25%. And why I'm saying 25 or 30% over here is through secondary studies that we have done. So shading of water bodies is not something new. So typical examples and studies that have been taken for that can be your shading because of bridges being built on rivers, not rivers or water bodies, pontoons being installed on water bodies, your harbors being installed, and then you can have an algal bloom or hyacinth growth on the water body. So everywhere in all the studies, 25% coverage is a kind of a critical number, 25 to 30%, for the ecosystem to either survive or to perish, which is where we recommend that the installation of water coverage is under 25%. Yeah.
Thank you, sir. The next one is from Bagu Harsha Kiran. What is a major advantage by installing in water than on land?
Hmm. I'll probably go back to the slide over here. One is any solar system needs large tracts of land, and in India itself, I think the target is upwards of 100 gigawatts or 150 gigawatts now. Sorry, 175 gigawatts. So every megawatt of solar system requires about 3.5 acres of land. Now we are struggling with land itself with the population of the country, and that's the case with most places. So floating solar uh, actually helps in conserving the land, and you use shared infrastructure, which is your evacuation system itself, number one. And if you've seen the paper, like about I think today or yesterday, they had given about uh, temperature rise that has been observed in villages around Pavagada. Pavagada is the largest solar park that is there in Asia, and people are experiencing temperatures of up to 3 or 4 degrees higher, or even 5 degrees higher right now. And they say that it's become very difficult for them to stay in those places. So that's a ecological impact of land mount systems. Typically, the floating solar systems are in remote locations, so you would not have these issues. And most of the hydropower projects itself would have displaced villages already. So you're actually using something that has already accounted for all the you're using infrastructure which has accounted for all the social or social impacts that it had earlier, social and environmental impacts. And in fact, with the remote installations of floating solar, you can also increase the capacity of electrification in remote areas itself around the water bodies. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next is again from Nehan Maskar. How the
Mhm.
maintenance will be carried out because panels will be on the water. So, will it be hard to maintain as compared to on the land?
Actually, I had covered that in the previous slides. Let me just see. So one of the key thing is the walkway, or the uh, what we call as a catwalk. So what you see over here. So this is the place where which is accessible for people to actually go and maintain the system. Now, for reduction in cost, people are saying there are companies which are saying they do not want catwalks or walkways by so that they save on, let's say, 30-40 lakhs of investment per megawatt. But the downside is, if a panel fails, there is no way to actually change the panel. So it's always a trade-off between your future expected maintenance versus initial capex. So our recommendation is always provide walkways and catwalks so that you can service the system. And the uh, entire inspiration for our system to use aluminum structures and continuous extruded pipes is so that it is more stable when people walk on it. Probably I'll try to pull out a video of a floating solar installation where you would see the when people are walking on blow molded HDPE buoys, uh, it seems very unstable and unsafe. Yeah. So Aditya, you can ask the other question. I'll just try to fill out the video.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. So the next is from Atul Kumar. I'm working in PV installation. How to get into the floating, and what steps or how or what other skills are required?
Uh, so he's into PV installation, right? See, floating solar is just an extension. Like today, there are no specific installers for floating solar itself. Whoever is doing it are installers who have already been there on the land mount systems or the rooftop systems. Now, in terms of upskilling, it is about actually understanding the system so that people can, so that you can actually see how the system needs to be installed, and that can be done by actually contacting manufacturers of the buoys itself, who would probably give you a basic training if there is an installation itself to be done. Now, most floating solar companies, considering that this is a new industry, are educating installers to actually install the system. Then coming to the maintenance, it's as simple as what a ground mount system is, because the moment you can start walking on these catwalks, you should be able to clean these systems. Yeah.
Okay, sir. The next one is from Sandeep Deshpande. What is the efficiency of this type of system?
I think I'd answered this earlier, but I'll tell that again. So it is typically 3 to 4%, at least 3 to 4% higher than ground mount system. So in India, typical ground mount systems give you about 16 to 16.5 lakh units per megawatt per year. So this can be about 3 to 4% higher than that, purely because of the cooling effect of the water on the panels itself.
Okay, sir. Next is from Dinesh Jala. Sir, I have listened that there is research going on the power production by rain using solar panels. How it can produce power from rain?
I am not aware of this. This is not floating solar. Power production of I'm seriously not aware of this particular technology.
It's
డాడీ
okay,
అమ్మ
sir.
మొబైల్ ఎక్కడ
So the next is from Bagu Harsha Kiran and Dinesh Jalla. It is also again about the it will it affect the sea creatures? I guess you have already answered that. The next is from Abhinavar. Are there any simulation software for floating solar systems?
Right now, the simulation software that we use is typically the PVSys, Helioscope, and all of that itself. But with respect to the structural analysis, you can use STAD or ANSYS or any of these things. So, in terms of yield itself, we can use any what do you say? Any existing solar simulation softwares. So that's, and just change the parameters appropriately so that you can get a yield which is most probable yield. The structural simulations have to be done with the regular structural software which is used. Yeah.
So the next one is again from Abhinav. One more doubt. Electrical systems in water, does it possess a concern? Example, IP rating, HV penetration, etc.
Yes, that's why I did mention that the electrical system has to be at least IP65 rated if it is floating above water, and if it's underwater, it has to be IP68. So that is mandatory for any floating solar installation in terms of the IP rating. And most panels come with this rating. And if you're looking at the array junction boxes and all of that, it has to be IP rated for you to actually use them over here, at least to 65 or 68.
So there is again from Bagu.
Yeah.
Temperature is increasing, then by this water temperature also will increase. Then water creatures will get affected by this also.
Actually, water produces a cooling effect, no? So the water temperature typically does not increase too much because you have certain amount of water being evaporated. So, and that is much lesser than the natural evaporative losses itself because of solar. And one of the reasons why temperature on land is increasing is because the solar park that I told is, I think, a couple of gigawatt, which spans across, I think, 15,000 acres or something like that. So there is a variation in albedo effect. You have more solar insolation albedo effect because there is no vegetation at all across the entire land. So you have more solar insolation being absorbed by the land, which makes it desert like, right? That is where you have increase in temperatures. Whereas when you have water, like even most of the heat can be removed with evaporation. Latent heat of water is much higher than uh, the heat that is required to raise the water by a couple of degrees Celsius. So with evaporation, you have most of the heat being removed and the water temperature remains more or less stable. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Uh, Abhinav says, thank you, sir. And for the mounting structures, any alteration from existing structures in terms of material used is required. For example, rusting issues due to humid condition.
Yeah, so most of the technologies today don't use MS or iron or galvanized iron. They do everything with HDPE itself. We are one of the very few companies who are trying things other than HDPE, where we are looking at UPVC. One of our systems uses HDPE, which is the blow molded system itself. The other one is UPVC with aluminium. So aluminium corrosion can be controlled. So that's not an issue, but we don't use MS or any other highly corrosive materials in a humid environment.
Okay, thank you, sir. The next one is again from Atul Kumar. What are the salary package offered in floating, and how is career growth compared to land PV installation?
It's a very new industry, so I wouldn't. So most people getting onto companies get onto companies on a technical role. So right now, I would say people would offer fairly good salaries if you have prior knowledge. But if someone's going as a fresher, then there is a learning curve, and the company is teaching them. So it will be typical to any other industry itself. And I would say if someone's worked in floating solar, it is a lot more difficult to design the system and maintain the system than a land-based system. So they can always have land PV installation itself as one of the backup options if they want to move out, land or rooftop. So in terms of salary, it might be slightly higher, but not very much, because again, everything adds on to the cost of the solar system itself, and today that's a brutally competitive market. Yeah.
Okay, thank you, sir. Actually, I had a doubt, sir. In this type of floating system that you are presenting now, that is the components of Navi. What type of what is? How can you just tilt these separate solar panels when it comes to a large system? That is, from where will you get this power? And
No,
what
in
will
Navi,
you be using? Like, will we be using motors to tilt this?
no, in Navi, it's a fixed tilt system. We are not talking of trackable system.
Okay,
So the
sir.
structures are, it's a fixed tilt floating solar system. Yeah. And typically, to answer your question, if there is, if people use trackers also, whether it's single axis or dual axis trackers, most of these tracking systems consume power from the power that is generated within the plant. It's called self consumption. So that's to answer your question. So even if people were to build tracking systems for floating solar, it will be powered by itself.
Okay, sir. Thank you, sir. I guess this is all from the questions. Are there more questions from the audience? If yes, please put on the chat box. So there are no questions, and Dinesh is saying, just to add a point for this class, whenever the rain drops on the solar panels, it will roll on the panels, and there will be some friction, and this friction produces a static charge, and by that again we can produce the power from rain. Thank you for this information, Dinesh.
Thanks, Dinesh, for the information.
Okay, sir. So you may continue if you had to show any video.
Actually, I'm not getting that. Let me just give me a minute.
Okay,
Yeah.
sir. Sure, sir. Thank you.
Actually, Aditi, I'm not getting it. Probably I'll send an email once I have the link for the video. That was basically on how people access it to maintain. So there are a couple of videos on YouTube, but I'll anyway pull it out and share the link, which can be shared over email. Yeah.
Okay, sir. Thank you so much, sir. Is there any other doubts from the audience? Yeah, Adair Williams is saying, I just joined the class and will like to know if I haven't missed a lot. Uh,
Mm.
yeah, we'll be sharing with you the information.
Oh, hello. Yeah, ma'am.
Yes, Adul.
Yeah, ma'am. Just I want to ask, ma'am, like in India, like now only like government and all the sectors, they are, they are moving towards solar. So apart from India, like which other countries like they are giving more importance and like where the growth of solar is increasing in the like in,
So Atul, literally every country is focusing on solar right now because it's a renewable source of energy, and the cost of production of solar is under, I think, 4 cents, 3 to 4 cents. So even if you look at the hottest place, one of the hottest regions, which is Middle East, they are investing heavily. The colder regions, which is Europe or Russia, they have already invested quite a bit on solar. Like people without land, which is your likes of Japan, Maldives, and all these places, they are investing on solar because they are island nations and they need a sustainable source of energy. So solar is here to stay, and I would say every country would invest resources and money on this.
And sir, like in solar also, like the person who is working in installation. So like
Hmm.
there are like different sectors, like installation is there, your maintenance is there, your designing is there. So like for person who is working in the field, so like for him, like which is the best option for their like career growth wise, sir?
It depends on the personal interests, Atul. Like you can, so if you're technically competent, then you can get into a consulting role, design role, and there you might have a better career growth over maintenance or installation. Or if you're entrepreneurial, then you can probably get some experience and start off your own installation firm. So career growth is dependent on the individual, not on the industry, I would say.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next is from Dinesh Jilla. Sir, is there any company which produces solar panels in the IPO?
I don't understand that question.
Okay, sir. So,
Oh,
yeah,
he's asking, is any company being listed? Not sure about
yeah,
that.
in the stock market, exactly.
No, not sure about that.
Okay, sir. The next is from Nehal Maskar. So, what circumstances may come if we install floating solar on seashore?
Hmm. So on seashore, I would say one is the corrosion itself because of salt water. So you'll need to take care of corrosion. Then you need to take care of the change in tides, change in the and the waves that are there, which are otherwise typically not there on let's say still water bodies. So it's a lot more challenging, and most offshore installations, not on solar, I would say, but today most of the offshore installations are on wind, and that's a couple of kilometers into the sea where you have a certain depth. And I don't see solar being installed like that because, again, to install 1 megawatt of wind, it would 1 or 5 megawatts of windmill. The space required is much lesser than the space required for 5 megawatts of solar. So, at least from the foreseeable near future, I don't see offshore solar installations as that much of a fad because we have enough and more fresh water bodies within land where you can install solar panels. Yeah.
Sir, there is one final from Narendra Yadav. Is there any career opportunity for freshers?
Hmm. Yes, there are freshers who join the solar industry. So and there are opportunities again, depending on the skill set, either design or on the installation side or even the project management side. Then you have on the maintenance part of the panels, right? So opportunities are plenty. It's about what interests the person and where they want to work. Yeah,
Thank you, sir, for this session. So, I guess we can wind up as there are no more doubts.
yeah.
So, shall we?
Thanks, Aditya, and thanks everyone for
Thank you, sir. So, thank
the
you so
time.
much, sir, for this very informative and as well as very interactive session. It is
Yeah,
sure to have given us this precise knowledge and real data on this ongoing projects in India. You have also clarified all the doubts of our participants, and that too very briefly. And also, on behalf of DIYguru, we thank all the active participants who had made the session very alive. Thank you, sir, and thank you all for joining. Now I'll be sharing a feedback link here. So please, attendees, here share your feedback with us, which is very valuable for us. Thank you, sir, once again.
yeah. Thank you. Bye.
Thanks.